Welcome into this week's edition of AWA Unleashed. We are the preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to telling the stories and reliving the memories of the American Wrestling Association. My name is Chris Tubbs. That is my Twitter handle at CMTubbs. I am on Twitter. I've got two other gentlemen. One of them is also on Twitter. One of them is not, but he's, some people have called him a twit. I don't think Twitter. But
you're off by one letter, but go ahead.
That's what letter am I off on? You know what? Never mind.
The I.
Oh.
Ding, 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 ding.
You know
yeah,
what?
Okay.
Sit here while you guys take your shots at me, and All right.
Shots? Nobody's taking shots at you.
No, go ahead.
I didn't say it. He said it.
How did you know what I had in my cup?
Cheers.
Should have figured that.
Messed it up yet.
Bless you.
Well, welcome into this week's edition, folks. Glad to have you along with us. This is AWA Unleashed. We do a podcast. We do a video stream. We like to sit here, have fun, and talk about the AWA. Last week, we talked about the villains, the heels, rule breakers, whatever you want to call them. Today, we're going to flip it, and we're going to get input from you guys about the top baby faces, the good guys, the fan favorites, however they were, kind of explored, however they were explained to you when you were a kid. First of all, let's take care of some business. You see 7th Avenue Pizza. You see that logo up there. If you're looking for pizza, ain't no better pizza on the market than 7th Avenue Pizza. All around the Twin Cities Metro. It's even in outstate Minnesota. If for some reason you're not in the upper Midwest and you have a hard time finding it, you really want to check it out, go to 7thAvenuePizza.com or hit me up on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and we'll see if we can get you hooked up. Also, want to thank Soda Stick as well. You guys, it is getting it's t-shirt weather. I believe they would call this a hot boy summer is what the kids are calling it. Boy is spelled B-O-I, by the way. Hot boy summer. But you can look good. You can look hot. You can look like a hot boy in your AWA Unleashed t-shirt. You want to rep the swag. Represent the AWA Unleashed Army. That's a gimmick I'm giving it. I don't know why. That's just what I came up with. That's my idea. That's what I'm saying. It's either that or we talk about Joe's nipples. That's why I figured I'd get the sponsorships out of the way. Unleashed for 15% off. So there we go. Are we good, guys? Did I miss anything?
No. You
guys okay with that? Yeah, they're good.
Say hello to Bert and Ernie for us.
Oh
boy. Okay. So we're going to talk about baby faces. Good guys. And I don't know if there really is, kind of like last week, guys, I don't know if there really is a clear definition of a baby face anymore. But I want to ask you guys, before we get to the listener top 10, I want to get your guys' thoughts. What would you define a baby face as? I'm gonna start with you, Joe.
Well, in the old school days, babyface was hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet, all-American. A very distinct difference between good versus evil. The Vern Gagnes of the world, the Luthezes of the world, Bruno Sammartinos. And today, it's just, well, like we said with the heels last week, it's just blurred. It just truly is blurred. It's a different dynamic than what was during the AWA days. And not saying that that's better or worse. That's just the evolution of professional wrestling.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the evolution or or if it's devolved or not. A babyface back in the day followed the rules unless he was provoked. He catered to the fans. He high-fived everybody. And he was the guy that the call went out to take care of the number one heel of the day. the business has changed so drastically. Like you said, Joe, it's not only blurred. In a lot of cases, baby faces are getting booed. It's the baby face today will take out a screwdriver and take a guy's eye out.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, the baby face put a guy in a hammerlock into a grapevine or whatever. So it's clearly 150, 180 degrees from what it was. But still, if the promotion makes it clear enough who the baby face is, who you're supposed to cheer for, sometimes the fans get it, sometimes they don't give a shit. So I think that's kind of where we're at.
Well, one other thing, just thinking back and looking back at the old school days of the AWA as a young fan, one of the things that had maybe not helped me, but that I noticed was when the guys came out to the ring, the baby faces would have all of the kids handing them the program to get their autograph,
right?
And the heels did not. That was, when's the last time you saw fans getting autographs from the talent when they're in the ring? That doesn't happen anymore.
No, it definitely does not happen anymore. And as we're talking about it, the evolution, Joe, if you think back to Greg Gagne and Ronnie Garvin at one of the pay-per-views, I believe it was out of Chicago, and Ronnie Garvin, who was allegedly the heel, was getting the cheers, and Greg got booed to the point where he actually in his after-match promo took a shot at the Chicago fans. So, it goes back a ways in the AWA as well. But again, as you said, it was blurred, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about who the baby faces were back in the day that really fit the role, according to our listeners and our viewers.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to say with this that when we asked for feedback, we didn't ask for any particular order, but as they came in, Mick, I think that they got assigned point. You saw patterns develop. And I think that's where you came and put this list together based on how you were getting it, even though you didn't really ask for any particular order.
Absolutely. Great point, Chris. Yeah, I kind of left it open. Just give me 10 names. Mm-hmm. But as you said, a pattern kept coming in where a guy would show up on almost everybody's list. So then I started assigning kind of a point system, to where they were, number 10, number 1, whatever. Mm-hmm. So this list is pretty damn close to a 1 through 10 or a 10 through 1 as we're going to do it today.
It's a good thing you have 10 fingers to be able to count that high, Mick.
10 fingers, 2 nipples.
A dirty dozen.
That's right. Yours are Bert and Ernie, mine are Stan and Ollie. So it's
another fine mess you've gotten us into, Mick.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's get to the first baby face. But here's what I envision you guys on like a Saturday night back in the day. Is that is that Joe and Mick after bars close? That's pretty accurate, right?
That's
actually, what that is this was a precursor, and we'll get to the list a little bit later on, but that was a precursor to Joe Chupik's nipples. If you look in that picture, Red Bastien is actually trying to elevate the nipples of Larry Hennig, and Larry is having none of it. So Chupik, in fact, is not the first guy to do that. So we are not going to give him any more kudos. It had been done in the past, and that's it. Now you can see, I don't know if Larry's hating it or enjoying it.
Okay, so Mick, so you're a play-by-play guy, Mick. So take me through call this spot in a match.
Call the spot. Okay.
Red
Bastien, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what in the world he's doing here. Apparently, he has grabbed the protruding nipples of Larry the Axe Hennig, and he's trying to insert them into Larry's nostrils, which, of course, would in turn block Larry's airways, his air passages, and allow Red to get the victory.
I disagree, Mick. It's clear. Take a look at that. He's just grooming him. His chest hair is overgrown, and he's just trying to clean it up a little bit. So I don't know what you're seeing, but I see something totally different.
Well, you're just trying to keep that title of nipple guy. So,
I never wanted it in the first place.
That's fine. There's a 24/7 title, and there's a nipple guy title.
Oh, nipple
and you're
on
it.
Hindenburg.
So can we move on to the
Yes,
list?
no, we can. We need a T-shirt that said "I'm a nipple guy." Okay, let's go to number one or number 10 rather. All kidding aside, this is a big time. I don't know that I've ever seen him as anything other than a baby face, and that is our friend Jumpin' Jim Brunzell.
Jumpin' Jim Brunzell epitomized babyface, especially here in the Twin Cities, our home base, coming from White Bear Lake, and of course, one half of the High Flyers. Jim was it's kind of interesting. If a heel got on Jim's case, Jim showed a lot of fire. But for the most part, Jim was the same guy on screen that he is off screen. Very quiet, very soft-spoken, very likable guy. And Jumpin' Jimmy, you know, along with Greg Gagne, they had that tremendous run as the High Flyers. It's very curious. Jim was the high flyer that made the top 10. The other one did not, although there were some votes. So very interesting. But Jimmy, absolutely all-American babyface to the core.
Yeah, two things come to mind with Jim. First of all, his genetics are incredible because the guy still looks phenomenal, and he's in his early 70s. I remember running into him about 10 years ago and looking at him, and it's like, shit, you could get in the ring right now and do it. Yeah. His comment was to me, well, the brain wants to, but the body doesn't want to. The other thing, you know, and it was sort of with the heels that we're talking about last week, tough for me to even think of Jim Brunzell as a singles wrestler. And I would have put Greg with him, and it would have been the High Flyers within my top 10 list of AWA baby faces. But hey, the fans voted. Jim is deserving of it. Incredible drop kick. God, did he get up there? If I'm not, didn't he set like a state high school high jump record at White Bear Lake or something along those lines?
Yep, and his drop kick was explosive, and people talk about it today. Go back on YouTube if you're not familiar with Jumpin' Jim, and you watch some of those high impact drop kicks. And a great friend of ours, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you look. You can't have a name like Jumpin' Jim if you don't have the ability to get up and execute a drop kick.
There you go. Yep.
All right, let's go to the next one here, guys. This was actually a tie. We have a couple of them. There's good old Red Bastien, and talk about Red first, and then we've got someone who was on our list last week, and we'll get to him here in a minute.
Red Bastien actually was from the Minneapolis area, and of course later on he was billed from different locations. Red started out as a kind of a junior heavyweight, a light heavyweight, was never real bulky in his career, and he started in the late 40s. And of course, he was in and out of the Twin Cities area during the 1950s, 1960s, and then of course in the 70s. Red was part of a tag team with the Crusher. They held the AWA World Tag Team Championship after Red's tag team partner, Hercules Cortez, was unfortunately killed in an automobile accident coming back from Winnipeg in July of 1971. Red chose the Crusher as his tag team partner. From a technical standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, they did not make them any better than Red Bastien. And, in the ring, he was so smooth and so believable. One of the original high flyers, if you will. And Red was such a nice guy that the Cauliflower Alley Club has maintained a Red Bastien Friendship Award, which kind of honors those who have been loyal to CAC and do their part for the wrestling business above and beyond. And just a class act. And absolutely top 10. Great baby face here in the Twin Cities. Also teamed with the late Billy Red Lions to form the Redheads tag team, feuded with the Vachons incessantly in the AWA.
I remember when that car accident happened. I was at the matches. I can't remember. I was 6 years old, but if it was at the St. Paul Auditorium or whatever, and just being heartbroken about hearing that Hercules Cortez had passed away. But hey, who better than to throw in the Crusher, my all-time favorite, personal favorite, in with Red Bastien. But this is about Red. And he was gone well before I had started with the AWA in '85. But I did have the fortune of meeting him at Kenny J's annual histiocytosis. Red was another one of the wrestlers who came there and did it for Kenny, did it for Kenny's grandson, and enjoyed attending. It was the mini AWA reunion, but I did have the pleasure and the honor of meeting Red. And Mick, everything that you said about him, from my limited exposure to him and from every account that I have heard in the industry, Red Bastien was just an outstanding human being.
And what's interesting about that, Chris, as well, is that Red was kind of an old school guy in terms of his era. And yet he garnered enough votes from the old school fans to crack our top 10. And that says a lot about his legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Our next one is also a tie for number 9. Again, these are ones that they didn't ask for in order, but as Mick was tabulating everything, he saw the patterns. So this was a tie with Red for our top 10 baby faces, good guys. Somebody that was on the list last week here, guys, and it's Dr. X. Dr.
X came to the AWA, and of course, Dr. X, Dick Beyer, the intelligent, sensational destroyer, came to the AWA in 1967. He was a heel for 90% of that tenure. Then he started feuding with the Larry Hennings, Lars Andersons, Blackjack Lanza, Bobby Heenans of the world, and left the AWA in 1970, came back a couple of years later as a full-fledged babyface. Now, of course, his identity as Dick Beyer was never mentioned when he came back. It was like the unmasking, back in 1970, October of 70 had never taken place. But this time there was not that caveat of I will unmask if I'm pinned or submitted in the middle of the ring. This was just straight ahead battling the heels. And Dr. X, legendary in the AWA, one of the greatest, probably the greatest masked wrestler that ever appeared in the business. And sadly, we lost him a couple of years back as well. But great guy. And Joe, another one that showed up continuously at Kenny J's benefits.
And we brought it up in the last episode about how he maintained kayfabe with the Dr. X character, whether it was Cauliflower Alley or Kenny J's histiocytosis. I'm just curious if he, when he went to the local grocery store or local Target, if he wore his mask to go there. I wouldn't
have been a good idea. I don't know if that would have played out.
Hey, to a supermarket's okay as long as it's not to a bank back in those days.
Good point.
But still, no. Dr. X, tremendous talent. Similar to Red Bastien, I never had the honor of working with him, but what a guy! He wasn't Dick Byers. He was Dr. X.
Even after he got rid of the mask, you still looked at him as Dr. X.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I've never understood, guys, when somebody gets rid of the mask and then they put the mask back on. Do you feel like that loses part of its allure, like the mystique, because you actually know who this person is, or is it easy for you guys to go back and look at this person without having a mask? Or with having a mask, rather.
With me, he was always Dr. X or always the Destroyer or whatever. As far as the mystique being lost a little bit, yeah, I could see that. Super Destroyer Mark III, Neil Gway, would actually take off a mask or be demasked in a 6-man tag, go back to the locker room area, and come back out to do a run-in at the end of the night with the mask back on. So it's like, wait a minute, hold it. Suspension of disbelief. I know wrestling fans sometimes don't have a great, memory for, names and dates. Either do we. That's been pointed out. But 15 minutes later, to come back out from the locker room with your mask back on,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of stretching it a little bit.
I could see it if he didn't get demasked, went back to the locker room. It was a heel in the mask, came back 15 minutes later unmasked and came back as a babyface. That'd be an interesting twist. But no, what you said, it's like, yeah, wrestling fans are a little bit smarter than that.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one here, guys. And it's somebody that I feel is one of the favorites of, it doesn't really matter what the era is. We saw his dad last week on the heels, but Kurt Hennig.
Isn't that interesting that Kurt Hennig, who was the AWA champion as a heel, aligned himself with Larry Zbyszko, turned on Greg Gagne, yada, yada, yada. And of course, his Mr. Perfect run in the WWE. But he was so good at what he did, both as a babyface and as a heel. He's one of the most popular guys that we always get letters about or emails or what have you here on the podcast. Kurt Hennig has a legacy second to none in the 80s into the 90s. There weren't too many that were better than Kurt. And it showed. This guy, in my tally, he was the 8th most popular guy, in our poll. And just love Kurt. What a ribber. I liked him a lot better as a heel than I did as a babyface. I thought he was okay, even teaming with his dad, Larry Hennig, as a face. But as a heel, as a wrestling personality, they didn't make him any better than Kurt Hennig.
I agree, but I'm going to, Kurt Hennig, in my opinion, does not deserve to be in the top 10 heel list. Going back to last week, if you remember the heels gimmick talk that we were talking, Mick, and I brought up Bruiser Brody, and you said, well, he wasn't in the AWA for that long. Brody was a heel in the AWA longer than Kurt Hennig was a babyface, or about the same amount of time.
True.
And Kurt as Mr. Perfect, Kurt as the AWA heavyweight champion in that whole run, the Roll of Dimes at Super Clash 2 in San Francisco, loved all of that. But prior to that, he was just another talented wrestler. I don't think he ever got over as a babyface during his early AWA run. So this one mystifies me a little bit.
I think, because we didn't really set parameters, and
it's all subjective. But how much of Kurt Hennig being a babyface is just attributed to the fact that he's Larry Henig's son?
Well, and not only that, and good point there, Chris, but remember, he had that run with Scott Hall, too. And, his run with Scott Hall definitely was a baby. I think that's where Kurt really started to blossom, is when he was teamed up with Scott Hall. And then, of course, with his dad, Larry, after that. Prior to that, like Joe said, Kurt was just kind of a milquetoast baby face. But, when we say to the fans, give us, who do you think were the 10 greatest baby faces of all time in the AWA? If we don't give them parameters, which, maybe we will next time, I think it just speaks to the overall popularity of Kurt Hennig.
Fair enough.
And I do agree, though, not having parameters on people. I feel like, because I don't want to limit it to the, last 10, middle 10, early part. It's like, I love allowing people to have whatever they feel, because it's all subjective. And that's wrestling. I've heard this many times. It's like a buffet. There's something for everybody.
Yeah, there's not. And, the thing is, there's some guys, if they would have gotten a lot of votes, but they were clearly heels and always heels and never babyface, then I'm going to say, hey, wait a minute. We can't put this guy on a top 10 babyface list. I think Kurt Hennig, on the other hand, kind of crossed that line a little bit.
Yep. Let's go to someone that I know is a friend of both of yours, or was a friend of yours. We just saw him last year at the reunion, just lost him not too long ago. And the fantastic, always capable Sodbuster Kenny J?
I was ecstatic to see how many people voted for Kenny J as one of the top baby faces because he was in and out of the ring. And I've said this so many times, and I know people might be getting tired of hearing it. Kenny J was a Hall of Fame human being and the greatest AWA enhancement talent of all time. He got his shine in a couple of main events and big time programs on television. But when you talk about a beloved babyface, not just a guy that the fans, hey, Kenny J, they loved Kenny J. And no better description, I don't think, Joe, than babyface Sodbuster Kenny J.
Yeah, I don't ever recall him being anything but a babyface throughout his entire run in the AWA. Now, granted, there was he in a squash match, as you know, he may have gone against a babyface like a Vern Gagne, but he still didn't. I don't recall him doing any heel moves. I mean, it was just
nothing over the top.
Yeah, I mean, you get in a heat of competition, you push the limits a little bit, but no, Kenny was a genuine babyface. He was a genuine jobber. He was a genuine human being. And I will admit, I am surprised to see him in the top 10 list at number 7, but I like it.
Sweet.
Let's go to the next one here, guys. Let me bring this one right up. And again, somebody else that was on last week's top 10 heels. That's George. Apparently, he goes by the name George Clooney, if I'm not mistaken.
He does.
Okay.
He, and occasionally he goes by the name. Well, no, he's actually distanced himself from the name Brad Pitt. He would wear a name tag at Cauliflower Alley that said "not Brad Pitt," just so people, knew the difference. But Jim Raschke, Baron von Raschke, we've talked about how bland he was when he got started in professional wrestling, and Vern Gagne trained him out of the University of Nebraska. Jim will be the first one to admit his personality did not register on any Richter scale. When he turned heel, one of the most notorious heels, not only in AWA history, but wrestling history in general. And then he grew on the fans. And boy, did he ever. How can this hated goose-stepping German get voted in by the University of Minnesota as a proxy student council president or, student body president or whatever it was? Beloved to this day. When he makes appearances, he is swarmed by wrestling fans. And to be honest with you, I thought the Baron was going to be even higher on this poll as a babyface than he was. But man, he did it all.
Well, I recall a promo that Jesse did, and he goes, "He looks like E.T." Which in that picture that we had posted up there, Baron, you could have probably starred in a couple of horror films back in the day. There was that guy from The Hills Have Eyes. He could be a twin of the guy from The Hills Have Eyes. But Baron, I mean, wow. I mean, what more can we say about Baron von Raschke? Definitely deserves to be on this list. His one-man stage show, the documentary that his son Carl had done. Do yourself a favor if you've not seen them. And as far as the documentary, even though Karch is in it, it's still worth seeing. But Baron von Raschke.
Wow, you guys.
Hang on a minute. Oh, cats, give me some Kleenex or something, will you? Now go ahead.
Talk about my nipples and it's a free-for-all. But anyway, no, Baron, top 10 without question. As far as being higher up, well, you get into the other names on this list, and
I get it.
I think he's right about in there. But think about all of the baby faces that we've gone through in the AWA. Mm-hmm. We could have a top 25 and still have people that should have been included. But that aside, Baron, you are number 6, and that is all you need to know.
Well done. We're going to go to number 5 again. This is a show that was voted on by you, the listeners, the fans, the viewers. You sent in your top 10 baby faces, your top 10 good guys, fan favorites, however you want to say it. And Mick allocated a point system to everything. And this is what you guys have decided on. We are now, I believe, going to crack the top 5. Yes, we are. And number 5, maybe one of the, we talked about the controversial moment a couple of weeks ago, but no denying the popularity of the Hulkster.
You can't deny it for a minute. And if you have a top 10 babyface poll for the AWA and you don't include Hulk Hogan, then you've got a bias and you're not being honest with yourself, because for that period of time in the early 1980s, selling out the St. Paul Civic Center every single week, there was nobody like Hulk Hogan. And his major AWA babyface run was relatively short. He didn't have the longevity as some of the other people on the list. He has his detractors. There's no question about it. One thing I think this showed is our demographic still, we're kind of crossing that line a little bit. We've got some old school on this list, and we've got Hulk Hogan, which I really like. I think maybe our demographic, our scope is expanding a little bit here. But Hulk Hogan is Hulk Hogan, pure and simple. He was magic at the box office, the greatest box office attraction of all time, certainly in the AWA. He had a skill set of maybe 5 or 6 moves, but that's what it was not all about. It was about putting asses in the seats and getting over, and you can't argue.
Well, when he did get his push, he was the incredible Hulk Hogan, but I think there might have been a little trademark and copyright infringement there. So
of course,
they went back to Hulk Hogan. But obviously, I mean, if he's not in the top 10 list of AWA baby faces, you don't know the AWA. I have said for years that Hulk Hogan transformed professional wrestling.
No doubt.
To me, that was the beginning of, well, not the beginning. To me, that was the line between old school was pre-Hogan and what we have today. He was the start of what we see today. He was larger than life. Throw in the Rocky III movie as Thunderbolts. Throw in his promos eventually, because as we've said, he had luscious Johnny Valiant as his mouthpiece. And you take a look at the early promos of Hulk Hogan. He gave Brad Rheingans a run for his money. But Hulk Hogan, my goodness, number 5 on the list. He could have easily been number 1, but more than deserving of being number 10. And let's run wild and let's go to number 4.
And I was just going to say, we can thank Gary DeRusha for part of Hulk Hogan's popularity, can't we? Because didn't he say that he was part of that conversation where they came up with the gimmick or the moniker Hulkamania?
Hulkamania's running wild.
I will never, that to me is probably one of the highlights because Hulkamania of this podcast so far, because Hulkamania was such a big part of wrestling. And to hear Gary tell that story, to be in on it, just sitting in a car, just coming up with it, to me is it's so fascinating and interesting. It's weird how this business works, isn't it? I mean, even being an outsider like I am, it's just funny how everything just kind of ties together.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, Gary won't get any residuals, which is the real that all this deal.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't probably even acknowledge us if he had royalties from Hulkamania. Let's go to another one here, and I know people love Billy Robinson.
Billy Robinson, from a technical standpoint, from a shooter standpoint, one of the greatest of all time. When they talk about the guys that could stretch you like a bungee cord, Billy Robinson is up there. Danny Hodge, Lou Thez, even Vern Gagne. But Billy Robinson, when he came to the AWA and started his feuds with Kobayashi and Blackjack Lanza, and then, of course, his matches with Nick Bockwinkel, I've said it, the most believable, stiffest, most hard-hitting matches in AWA history, as far as I'm concerned. In his later years, Billy turned a little nasty, turned heel. He aligned himself actually in some areas with Lord Alfred Hayes as the heel Englishman. There's no denying Billy Robinson's capability in the ring. What I mentioned last week, and Joe and Chris, I know you will recall this. Some of the guys that were baby faces in the ring did not necessarily carry that personality with them to the outside of the ring. I didn't have a lot of interaction with Billy outside of the wrestling, but I know people who have, even guys in the business, and he could be a little arrogant. Billy knew how damn good he was. He was a shooter. He was the real deal, and he wasn't always the easiest guy to get along with. In terms of his legacy in the AWA, his popularity. Here it is. You're seeing him in the top 10, and there's no denying it. There's no denying that Billy Robinson was one of the greatest baby faces in AWA history.
As a young fan, when he first came, he had a style of wrestling. What's tough for me to say that I'd never seen because I was like 5 or 6 years old, but it fascinated me, the moves and the holds that he could do. And being a Vern Gagne fan at the time as well, I was really torn because everybody wanted to see Billy Robinson against Vern Gagne and what would happen and all, excuse me, and all of this. But it was in the movie The Wrestler. I believe that was released 73, 74, somewhere in that time frame, early 70s, we'll say, for those that want to or need to be specific. But when that movie came out, I could not wait to see it, A, as an AWA fan, but B, to just see, even though it was up on the big screen and it wasn't a real match, to see Vern Gagne and Billy Robinson go at it. I couldn't wait. And then I saw the finish and was disappointed as hell. But no, Billy Robinson, yeah, another guy. He deserves to be in there. And what you said about his out of the ring personality, yeah, I've heard the same stories that he had a bit of an edge to him and wasn't exactly a locker room favorite.
It's interesting that you mentioned Billy and Vern Gagne because they did have a series of matches around the horn, and Vern was the subtle heel in those matches. It was getting on in Vern's career a little bit. Still in the 70s, he had some legs left, but Billy Robinson was kind of getting the crowd behind him in his matches with Vern Gagne.
But I don't recall Billy and Vern never wrestled at the Civic Center or in the Twin Cities because that was Vern's territory. Vern didn't want somebody else to be a bigger baby face than him, if I remember.
Well, what was interesting about that, good point, Joe. One thing I would say to that is Vern, in his early career, was legendary in Chicago. And he was over massively working the shows there. And it was in Chicago, actually, that Vern and Billy collided, and where Vern now was kind of the subtle heel. But Vern did that with babyface competition. Vern would get disqualified for tossing the babyface opponent over the top rope. So it wasn't only Billy Robinson where he was the subtle heel. It was Bill Watts, Edouard Carpentier. But that's the way it played out. But Billy Robinson, again, what can you say?
Do you feel like Vern? Well, you know what? Well, I'm just going to ask the question now. Do you feel like Vern in that situation felt like he was better suited to be the heel or the bad guy in those matches, or do you think that he actually enjoyed being the bad guy in those? Because the impression I get was that he wanted to be the good guy. he wanted to be the number one fan favorite wherever he was at. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding that.
No, I don't think he wanted to be the bad guy or enjoyed being the bad guy. It's like with, as I said, with Greg Gagne and Ronnie Garvin. It just happened. The fans,
the crowd decided it. The crowd decided it. Listen to the crowd. Listen to the crowd.
Perfect. But Vern also saw that there was money if there was a rematch. If Billy Robinson's on the verge of victory and Vern, to save his title, throws Billy Robinson over the top rope and then becomes the subtle heel, you got a rematch. You got money. Billy will get it next time. So Vern was a very, very smart businessman. So I don't know that it bothered him all that much in the scheme of things.
Bothered him, no, but there was at no point knowing Vern as well as I think I did. I don't think there was ever a time that Vern considered being a heel. It just wasn't Vern. Vern Gagne was a babyface from the get-go, the All-American kid. It would shock me and amaze me if Vern Gagne ever would have been a heel in the ring. I don't see it. Don't see it at all.
Okay. Well, as for the top three, let's just say this individual was on last week, and you could say he made a pretty good heel, but made also a lovable babyface too.
Who let this dog out?
The man is smiling. He's got to be I think that's a smile. I'm not real sure. It could be a sneer. But Mad Dog Vachon. We talked about Mad Dog's early career here in the AWA, and I won't even say it was an early career because he came here in '64 and he was still working as a heel for the next 15 years. So it wasn't exactly like he had a flash in the pan heel career. So you've got a guy who bit, clawed, slapped, gouged, took it outside the ring, hit a guy with a chair, hit him with the bell. And this was your eventual babyface, because now there's always another guy that you hate more. Wrestling was cyclical that way, where, Jerry Blackwell, all of a sudden the fans hated Jerry's guts. Who do they bring in? Mad Dog Vachon to take care of Jerry Blackwell. Big John Studd, another guy. You bring in the Dog. Dog wound up teaming with guys like Vern Gagne, the Crusher, in his later days. So the Dog is kind of like Baron von Raschke, I think, in that sense. He grew on everybody. Joe, you've said it. He never changed his style. He didn't have to. Mad Dog was never going to put you in a drop toe hold into a chin lock and, do chain wrestling with you. He was going to split you wide open on the ring post. But again, talk about a guy whose outside the ring personality belied what he was in the ring. Pussycat Vachon. But in the history of the business, and Chris, you've talked about, where he was building that casket
for Pine Box.
That's right. Nobody was getting over as a babyface more than Mad Dog Vachon. When he would go after the eyes of Jerry Blackwell or rip at his nose, the roof blew off the St. Paul Civic Center.
Well, going back to the photo that you had put up earlier with Mad Dog smiling, or was it a sneer? I think he had just been told that he was finally going to get Jerry Fatwell in a lights out a Nigerian death match. That's a happy Mad Dog getting ready to go against Blackwell. No, Maurice, but I mean, what can you say about him? One of the all-time greatest characters, both inside and outside the ring. Even though he was Pussycat Vachon outside of the ring, he was still a character. In regards to that, the most discussed interview that when somebody finds out that I worked for the AWA, Mad Dog comes up and they talk about the interview where he's building the casket. And I would correct them. It's a pine box. Do yourself a favor. If you've never seen the Mad Dog Vachon Pine Box interview done by Mean Gene Okerlund, do it. take a look at an old school classic interview. And at the very end of it, as Mad Dog is sitting there pounding on the pine box, just take a look at all of the shit flying off of the shelves. I mean, it is legendary. And I believe Mean Gene's line at the end of it is, he may be an apprentice carpenter,
Yes.
but he's a seasoned ring veteran. The death match, Mad Dog Vachon and Jerry Blackwell, and Mad Dog is sitting there. Enough of I can't do it. Go on YouTube and see it.
It is my number one all-time favorite AWA promo. It might be one of my favorite promos of all time.
Oh, it was tremendous. And and again, Mad Dog unaware of the TV cameras and the microphones and the boom mics and lights and everything else. Gene startled him when he came up. Mad Dog was so intent on building that casket that he didn't see the truck, didn't see any of it. Well, when you've made a vow to eliminate a guy from the world, as Mad Dog did with Jerry Blackwell, the world was not big enough for the both of them, so Blackwell had to go. To boot, Blackwell had to go. One thing, God love him, just as an aside, I was interviewing Mad Dog one time, and he was being very complimentary to me in the interview. And he finished it up by saying, "There's only one thing wrong with you. You breathe." And it's kind of how that one, wound up. But gotta love Mad Dog Vachon. I think the nails and the boards are still flying around. I wonder if he didn't use some of Vern's, lumber from Vern's camp, like George did to build his cabin.
You were talking about how Mad Dog couldn't have seen the equipment and everything.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the interview, on the right side, you will see a cable hanging down with a little switch. It was a light that they got in the shot, but there was so much chaos and so much in there. I believe it was shot at Carol 11, or it was WTCN back at the time. I believe it was shot at WTCN Studios, either that or Channel 9, back in the prop room. But my goodness, we could probably do an entire episode on that. I just wish we could actually play that interview because it is legendary.
Oh, man. Go ahead.
Gene must have had a GPS back then, because remember, Mad Dog said, "How did you find me?" Okay. All right, we got a couple more here, don't we, Chris?
Yes, we do. I'm kind of surprised here, guys. We've got two more baby faces left. I don't think the names are going to surprise people, but maybe I'm a little shocked at the order of these two. Number 2 is Vern Gagne. I figured he would be number 1, but he came in as number 2.
It's very interesting, and I think a lot of this might have to do with the demographic too, because we've got our fans out there that are more new school, or they came in towards the end of the AWA run, as you did, Chris. And since that time on the internet, there's been so much negativity about Vern, in terms of, him not hanging on to the AWA and the collapse and everything else, that people lose sight of the fact that in his day, like Joe said earlier, Vern Gagne was a freaking legend, not only in Minnesota, but particularly in Minnesota, but all over the country. Great amateur wrestler, alternate on the Olympic team, a Minnesota legend. He hung literally with kings and queens and presidents and senators. And for a long time, Vern was the guy. You started to get into the 1970s a little bit, where Vern had already been here for a long time. And you got this new breed, Billy Robinson, Edouard Carpentier, what have you, challenging for his title. Now the luster started to wear off just a little bit. But I agree with you. These two, number 1 and number 2, could have easily been flipped, and the point can be made, as you said, for Vern being number 1.
Now, Mick, you said it. Well, one of the things that you said that bothers me, and I've defended Vern about this for years. Um, Vern Gagne deserves his mantle, his pedestal, his place atop or near the top of a Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling history for what he did. I believe when it was, I think it was 1949. Again, if I'm off by a year or so, whatever, we're reminiscing. So put away the exacto bullshit razor blade stuff. But he was as big a star as there was in the country when he was on the Dumont Network. He was a part of the first wrestling show on television. In fact, professional wrestling, as a side note, helped to push the sales of television. It was that popular. And the part that I'm trying to remember is that Vern, I think Greg told me at one point, or I had read someplace, that Vern was like the first professional athlete to earn $100,000 in a year. This is back in the 1950s, a professional wrestler earning that much money. Vern was that over, and he continued to be for the next 20 some years. As far as, going back to the Billy Robinson thing and Billy getting more of a pop than Vern, I think like anything, people, I don't want to say that they got bored, but Billy was the latest shiny object.
Yes. He was the new toy everybody wanted to play with.
Exactly. It's not that they disliked Vern. It's just that they wanted to see something different and see something new in Billy Robinson. But as far as Vern Vern wasn't the reason the AWA went under. I mean, we could do an entire episode about how, the specifics and all of that. But in fact, maybe you guys did before I came on board. I don't know. But Vern Gagne, my God, he had called me like he called me his fourth child. He called me like a son. He raised me from a pup with the AWA. It broke my heart at the end when we sold the AWA to Vince McMahon or to the WWE. And during that time, dementia was setting in. And having gone through that with my own dad years later, it's just such a horrible disease. And to see what it took away from Vern Gagne, what was tough to see. But I will say this, anytime, any place, Vern Gagne walked into a room and that room lit up. He had a charisma unlike any other I've ever seen in my nearly 58 years of life. And Vern Gagne, only because I agree with who number one is, Vern Gagne, in my opinion, should and is number two.
I feel like I missed out on seeing the height of, I know that I missed out, and what I can see on old videos and tapes or whatever, I don't feel like I really get the full feeling of what it was like to have Vern Gagne be kind of the axis of professional sports in the Twin Cities because of the notoriety. And I do feel like there's a lot of us that we hear about the end of the AWA. We hear about the property. We hear about the dementia. And I feel like maybe it's just my opinion here, guys, but I feel like Vern Gagne is maybe cast in a negative light unfairly based on the fact that so many of us really did not experience the height of Vern Gagne's popularity firsthand. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
You're not wrong at all. And I will say this as, the elder statesman here, unfortunately. Vern in the 1950s, like Joe said, on the Dumont Network was a national star. Early before 1961, let me say that in 1960 and 61, wrestling was drawing so well here. Wrestling was a big deal, even in the newspapers. And then all of a sudden you get the Minnesota Twins and the Minnesota Vikings coming in.
Yeah, 1961, yeah.
1961, now all of a sudden wrestling is kind of shifting its locale on the sports pages. Vern was so good. I think what happened, Chris and Joe, in the 70s, if you look at the record, Vern was not doing a lot of wrestling, even in the 1970s, in the early 70s. He had the schedule of a Brock Lesnar back in the day. You know, maybe once a month he would defend the title. So he was starting to slow down a little bit. Then you get Nick coming into town, you know, Bockwinkel, and saying, you know, where's Vern Gagne? Why isn't he defending the championship? So there was some truth to that. I have said this before, and I'll say it again. The first match I went to live as a kid, I got up to the ringside and I got Vern Gagne's autograph. My dad said, give the autograph pad to Vern. Come on, I wasn't even paying attention. I was thrilled beyond belief. Fast forward, 27 years later, and I joke about the stuff that happened at the Showboat, but I'll tell you what, and I know, Joe, you feel this way, I will forever be indebted to and honored by the fact that I worked for one of the greatest wrestlers in the history of this sport, period.
You said it all right there, Mick. I am honored that I worked for him. I'm honored that I got to be friends with him. Honored to be a part of his AWA legacy. Yeah, Vern could be, when it came to business, Vern could be a prick. But you've got this multi-million dollar company and dealing with all of these personalities, dare I say, sometimes you got to be a prick. The degrees may differ, but as a person, as a human being, as a professional wrestler, and hell, even as a promoter, I mean, Vern was known as being one of the best payers in the industry back in his day. That's why a lot of the guys love to come up here. So yeah, hey, none of us are perfect. I'm sure there's somebody that can say bad things about each and every one of us. You try to do the best that you can. That's what Vern did. And in my opinion, he did that well. And that got him number 2 on this list because you, the fans, remember and realize it, despite all of the bullshit about, hey, Vern did this, he body slammed a guy and killed him. Yeah, he had dementia. Shut up about it. Vern Gagne, the promoter, Vern Gagne, the wrestler, deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling history.
And number 1 here, guys, well said about Vern. I'm glad that we are able to give him his shine because he definitely deserves maybe more than what he gets, and that's saying something. Number 1, I'm looking for that. If I can, I don't know. Can you guys see it?
Nope.
Come on, you turkey neck bum.
I know. You just gave
My
it away.
girlfriend Wanda must have taken the picture.
Where's the picture?
I'm working on it, God. It was here.
$7 million a year.
Anyway, I thought he was getting that a month.
Before, if we have the picture, if we do, we don't, we know. But this is Chupik's favorite guy.
Oh God!
And
hold on. I'm getting guys. Come on, man. Give me a little bit of.
Well, we're trying to kill time. We're just trying to kill time.
I know, but you didn't have to throw me under the bus. I mean, my God.
Oh, it's not under the bus. It's just, hey, we're creating an angle here. My nipples needed to have a heel.
The picture won't load. What's wrong with the picture?
Couldn't tell you.
The picture won't load. Picture won't load. Do I have to?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the wrestler that made Milwaukee famous, the Crusher.
So good up until now.
Envision in your head the picture of the Crusher. Number 1, the most beloved babyface of all time. And Chupik, with that Polish lineage, I know you love Crusher. And again, ladies and gentlemen, in his early career, one of the most notorious bad guys there was, whether he was Reggie Lasowski, teaming up with Stan Hollick as the Lasowski brothers, or Stan Nielsen, or when he came to the AWA as the Crusher in 1962. He had a heel run like no other. Fast forward to late 1964, Crusher had taken a hiatus from the wrestling business. His dad had passed away. He kind of took a step back. In his stead, his cousin, allegedly, Dick the Bruiser, walked out on the heel tag team of Larry Hennig and Harley Race in a 6-man tag team match. Hennig and Race were furious about it. They wanted to get Bruiser and a partner. And Bruiser put out the call to Milwaukee. I don't know which saloon he got a hold of him, but Crusher answered the call, came back to the AWA as a full-fledged babyface in January of 1965, and 20-plus years later, he was still the go-to guy. He was still, even though he could barely move in the ring after a while, couldn't even take a body slam. But when he came to the there it is. Look, now the man is a genius, ladies and gentlemen. That's why he is the head honcho here. That's Crusher. That could be Wanda. That looks a little bit too thin to be Wanda, but that is Crusher and one of his dollies. Thank you, Chris. You're a genius. You're a man among men. Crusher, without a question of a doubt, the greatest babyface in the history of wrestling, the man who threw dog food at Mad Dog Vachon, the man who threw carrots and tomatoes at Killer Kowalski, who was a vegetarian, the man who coined the phrase Dolly Sisters, the man who came out with the Jack in the Box with Pop Goes the Weasel, the man who led the fans around ringside in a tribute to the Minnesota Twins when they won the American League pennant in 1965. Legendary to a fault. Ladies and gentlemen, in my estimation, you nailed it. And this was by a pretty big margin, too, I want to tell you.
I like to think that I'm in pretty good company there with agreeing with all of these fans, because the Crusher has been my favorite since I can remember. There's no denying that, being of Polish lineage, both of us being of Polish lineage, that didn't have something to do with it. But he was that blue collar guy from South Milwaukee that, now granted, when he was wrestling, I couldn't even get into a bar. In fact, I barely knew what a beer was. But I did know that his promos were unbelievable. From Wanda losing weight, she got down to 250 pounds, and so he had to find a new girl. From doing his training regimen, where he had to increase his input of potatoes and kielbasa and beer. He's going to carry a keg of beer on his shoulder to go up and down the hill. He's going to go fishing on Lake Minnetinky, and he's going to go look for dollies that are wearing their bikinis. I mean, he was a genius. The Pop Goes the Weasel. Jerry Fatwell, he came out there with a blown up Miss Piggy doll. His cigars. I mean, too bad we don't have another hour. Actually, probably good for you, because I could continue to rant and rave about how much I absolutely loved the Crusher. Do yourself a favor, much like the Mad Dog Vachon Pine Box promo. Do yourself a favor and look up the Crusher. Look it up on YouTube. One of the pay-per-views that I had done was about, I think it was about a 5 to 6 minute highlight package of the Crusher doing things. In fact, it's on my YouTube channel, my personal YouTube channel. Not monetized, so I'm not making money. I'm just sharing work that I have done. But that was one of my favorite edits to do, because I got to sit there and look through all of these old promos of the Crusher. There was an extended one that he did with Roger Kent, and he's talking about Johnny Cash and how being at the bar and being there at bar close, it's funny. Everybody gets sentimental at the bar close. I mean, just I'm at a loss because he was just that fucking good, period.
Remember Crusher's tip for fishermen. This is how you catch a fish. You're on the boat in the middle of Lake Mittitiki. You hold a beer bottle over the water. You lean over the boat, hold the beer bottle. When the fish jumps up to get the beer, you take a hammer, you hit the fish over the head, and you bring him into the boat. There's a fishing tip that I don't think that Ron Shera ever came up with, but Crusher did. And Chris, I know that you're very interested in something that's been going on the past few years over there in Milwaukee that they do every year now, Crusher Fest.
I mean, we have been asked, guys, if we would be willing to do our show from Crusher Fest. I've had numerous people ask me, are you guys planning to go to Crusher Fest? I would love to go to Crusher Fest. The man who made Milwaukee famous. I would absolutely love if we could take the show on the road and honor who fans say is the number one babyface in the history of the promotion.
Well,
I think it would be great.
That's what, the first weekend in June, I believe?
Yes. Yeah. I know this year I can. Let's see if we can make that happen.
I would be all for it, and God bless him. God bless the Crusher, and he was every man. And fans, you got it right. You nailed it.
Yes, they did. Let's go ahead and wrap it up here, guys. Mick, before we get to the shout outs, I know that you want to pay a special tribute to somebody that we lost recently.
You know, back in the Ropers and Fridley, Georges and Fridley days, when the PWA, Eddie Sharkey's promotion, was red hot, and then going on into the 90s, there was a referee about 5'4" and all of about $120, and his name was Mike Diamond, and his real name was Mike Warkeld. And Mike Diamond got into the ring with the big guys, the 6'7" guys, the monsters, the whatever, and he had a cult following of his own, did Mike, and outside of the ring, very funny guy, soft-spoken, what have you. We had an opportunity to reunite with Mike at the AWA reunion last October, and unfortunately, we got word that Mike has passed away, one of the old guard, and brings back so many memories of those glory days of SNR and Ropers and Georges and the PWA. God bless you, Mike. Godspeed. Safe travels.
10 bells.
All right, let's get to our shout outs here, guys, and then we'll go ahead and bring it home. Mick, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Brian Gardner. Brian is such a loyal, such a great guy. See him at all the local indie shows, MAW in particular. Great old school fan. Love getting his messages on Facebook and Messenger and email. Loves the business, loves what we do, and we love you back. Brian Gardner.
And my shout out this past weekend, I was at a family gathering, and one of my nieces, her husband, told me that he actually listens to the show. And so I apologized to him first. But then I was like, hey, this is perfect. I get to give somebody a shout out from my own family. So Kevin Walsh, thank you for listening and being a fan of AWA Unleashed. And sorry for these two knuckleheads, but hey.
I'm glad you said actually. You make it sound like we have people that are like, I say that I listen, but you're like, he actually listens. Yeah. That just proves that nepotism alive and well here on the program.
I asked him, is his life that boring that he listens to us? And he comes, hey, what, am I going to be serious? I mean, come on, mate. But he actually said he enjoyed the show.
We are a fucking shot of adrenaline. every week. I'm telling you that.
That's right.
We are.
That's right. Yes.
right.
Well, I'm gonna shout it.
Just perked up.
I know. You can cut glass with those things right now, Joe. I am going to give a shout out to somebody that I am not related to. Unlike I am not all about the nepotism like Joe is. And I'm going to go to Golden Era Pro Wrestling at Golden Era Pro 83 on Twitter. They've had some really good comments to us on Twitter. And, again, just interact, have some fun. Life's too short to be all pissy and cranky about things. That's what I love about some of the people that follow us on Twitter. They enjoy it, they get it, and we're having fun. So that being said, guys, we're just about ready to wrap it up. Thanks Soda Sticks, thank 7th Avenue Pizza. Next week, guys, we've got a fun little topic that kind of ties into what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks.
Indeed, we do. And one of, in my estimation, greatest heel to babyface turn in the history of the AWA. And we're gonna kind of pick it apart a little bit. And the impact.
Taboot.
My God, I don't know if that's the cat's tail or if it's a missile.
You know what? I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know where that came from. Somebody's very excited about the Jerry Blackwell turn.
Yeah, I would say so. By the way, and that's going to be next week. We're going to talk about that. By the way, my cat went on High Spots, ordered a championship belt, and next week is going to be proclaiming itself as the neighborhood cat wrestling champion and perform in front of 20 cats in an alley. So, certainly it has as much credibility as any other championship in wrestling.